building. I just want to give you, okay. So by the way, once again, good afternoon. I just want to give you some insights, no, regarding a capacity planning. Now, the production system design planning considers input requirements, conversion process, and output. So after considering the forecast and long-term planning, organizations should undertake capacity planning, because capacity planning is defined as the ability to achieve, store, or produce. So for an organization, capacity would be the ability of a given system to produce output within the specific time period. So in operations management, capacity is referred to as an amount of the input resources available to produce relative output over a period of time. So in general terms, capacity is referred as a maximum production capacity, now, which can be attained within a normal working schedule. So capacity planning is essential to determining optimum utilization of resource and plays an important role decision-making process. For example, extension of existing operations, or in modification to the products, or product lines, starting new products and others. So there are some there's a strategic capacity planning, because a technique used to identify and measure overall capacity of production is referred as strategic capacity planning. The SCP is utilized for capital-intensive resource like plant, machinery, labor, and others. The SCP, or the strategic capacity planning, is essential as it helps the organizations in meeting the future requirements of the organizations. Planning ensures in operate costs are maintained at a minimum possible level without affecting the quality. So it ensures that the organizations remain competitive and can achieve the long-term growth plan or growth plan. So, okay, I just want to share the screen for the presentations of our, since it's already sent to me, so I just simply play. Then if you have some questions, do not hesitate to ask questions. Then we will address your question properly. Kindly post in our chat box.
Good morning. My task today is to discuss the topic capacity planning in the subject productivity measurement and quality management. So to start, let us define capacity. So capacity is the number of units a facility can hold, receive, store, or produce in a period of time. It is the upper limit or ceiling on the load that an operating unit can handle, which includes equipment, space, and employees' skills. So for an organization, capacity would be the ability of a given system to produce output within the specific period of time. While in the operation, capacity is referred to as an amount of input resources available to produce relative output over the specific period of time. So capacity planning is essential to be in determining optimum utilization of resource and it plays an important role in decision-making process. For example, extension of existing operations, modification of product lines, and starting a new products or having innovation to a new product. So, capacity planning is essential to determine the inputs requirement, conversion of production process, and its output. And in capacity, we also have to consider the facility. So facility planning should answer with the following WH questions. So first is what kind of capacity is needed. Second is how much capacity is needed to match the demand. Third is when more capacity is needed. The fourth one, where facilities should be located or the exact location. And how facilities should be arranged or the layout of the facility. And from that, we can create a strategic capacity planning. So what is the goal of a strategic capacity planning? It is to achieve a match between a long-term supply capabilities of an organization and the predicted level of long-run demand. It is also a technique used to identify and measure overall capacity of production. So we have the overcapacity and the undercapacity. When we say overcapacity, it exceeds the operating costs that are, or the operating costs are too high. While under the undercapacity, strains resources and possible loss of customers. So strategic capacity planning is essential as it helps the organization in meeting the future requirements. And it also ensures the operating costs are maintained at a minimum possible level without affecting the quality of the product. It ensures the organization to remain competitive and achieve a long-term growth plan. So capacity planning should answer with the following key questions. First is, what kind of capacity is needed? How much capacity is needed to match the demand? So what is it needed? When is it needed? I mean. And the related question is, how much will it cost? What are the potential benefits and risks? Are there sustainability issues? Should capacity be changed all at once, or through several changes or smaller changes? Can the supply chain handle the necessary changes? And issues to be considered in strategy formulation. First is the capacity strategy, demand patterns, growth rate and variability, the facilities, the technological changes. So it is the rate and direction of technology, the changes in the technology, behavior of competitors, availability of capitals and other inputs, and the human resources. So we have the types of planning over the time horizon or the time frame. First is the long-range planning. So the company or the organization add facilities and equipment needed in the long-run operation of the business. And the second is intermediate range planning, wherein they implement subcontract. They also add equipment and implement shifting of the employee or the personnel. While in the short-range planning, they schedule jobs, they schedule personnel, and also allocate machinery, which is just needed in the short-run operation of the business. Now, what is the importance of capacity decision? So its importance is, first, is impact the ability of the organization to meet the future demand. Next, affect operating cost. It also affect lead time responsiveness and our major determinant for initial cost. Involve long-term commitment of resources and affect competitiveness. It also affect the ease of management and important and complex due to globalization and need to be planned for in advance due to their consumption or financial and other resources. So capacity measures, there are two capacity measures that we have to consider. First is design capacity. Design capacity is a maximum output rate of service capacity an operation, process, or facility is designed for. While effective capacity is a capacity a firm can expect to attain given its product mix. So product mix is the price, place, promotion, product price, place, promotion, methods of scheduling, maintenance, and standard of quality. Okay. Design capacity minus allowances such as personal, time, maintenance, and scrap. So capacity-related concept, the first one is the actual output. So actual output is a rate of output actually achieved. It cannot exceed effective capacity. Utilization, it is the actual output as % of design capacity. And the efficiency or the efficacy is the actual output as % of effective capacity. So it is computed based on this formula. So actual output over effective capacity equals efficiency or the efficacy. It is represented in a percentage form. While utilization is the measure actual capacity usage of a facility, work center, or machine. So actual output over design capacity, also expressed in percentage, is a utilization. So let's have this example, efficiency and utilization. So we have here the design capacity, which is 50 trucks per day. Its effective capacity is 40 trucks per day. And its actual output is 36 units per day. So how to compute the efficiency? Actual output, which is 36, over effective capacity, which is 40, equals 90%. So presented into percentage form. While its utilization is actual output, which is 36 units per day, over 50 units per day equals 72%. So its utilization is 72%. Now let's move to the determinants of effective capacity. So how can we say that we are effective? So we have to consider the following. First is the facility. So examine the facilities by knowing the sizes, the location, the ambience, the layout, or the ventilation of your facilities. Next is product and service factor. So consider your product if it is similar to your competitor and make it different from other competitor. Next is the process factor. Under the process factor, we have to consider its productivity rate and its quality rate. And on the human factor, it talks about our employees, our worker in the organization or in the company. So consider the skills of your worker, the experiences, and give motivations. Or take a look also on their absenteeism in their job. Next is the policy factor. Under the policy factor, we also consider the overtime system that we implemented in the company, number of shifts of our worker, or the shifting process. And then we have to move to the operational factor. Under the operational factor, we have the scheduling problem that we are facing, purchasing requirements, inventory, or shortage of raw materials. And the external factor, it is the outside sources, so the product standard, government policies, global competition, and the economic situation. And the strategy formulation are typically based on the assumption or the prediction based on the long-term demand patterns, technological change, and competitor behavior. Special requirement for making good capacity decision. So we have to forecast the demand accurately, understand the technology and capacity increments, find the optimal operating level, and building for change. And key decisions in capacity planning, we have the amount of capacity needed, timing or the frequency of changes, extent of flexibility of facilities. It should be adaptable. External sources of capacity, need to maintain balance. And capacity planning should forecast based on the long-term consideration and the short-term consideration requirements. Now how to calculate processing requirements? So in calculating, we have to forecast sales within each individual product line, calculate equipment and labor requirements to meet the forecast. Now let's have this example. So we have here product 1, 2, and 3. So under the product 1, we have the annual demand of 400, standard processing time, which is 5. So its processing time needed for the 100 demand is 2,000 hours. On the product 2, we have the annual demand, which is 300. Its processing time is 8 hours. So its processing time needed is 2,400. On the product 3, we have the annual demand, which is 700. Its processing time is 2. So its processing time needed is 1,400. This is how we calculate the processing requirement for each product. So I also have here an example based from the given example to you a while ago. So if the department works 1 8-hour shift, 250 days a year, calculate the number of machines that would be needed to handle the required volume. So based from the example a while ago, we have 5,800 hours needed divided by 250 days a year divided by 8, sorry, it has a typo error, equals 2.9 or rounded off to 3 machines needed in order to attain the required volume. Okay, what if we cannot attain or we cannot achieve the required volume or the required demand from our customer? So we have here the capacity cushion. So capacity cushion is the amount or the reserve capacity of a process uses to handle the sudden increase of demand or temporary loss of production or the loss of capacity of production. It is the extra capacity used to offset the demand uncertainty. So capacity cushion is 100% of less your utilization. So capacity cushion, we can also have this strategy wherein the organization may have a greater demand uncertainty typically that have greater capacity cushion. Organization also may have the standard products and services generally have the greater capacity cushion. Now let's move to the service capacity planning. So in service capacity planning, there are challenges that we may encounter. So these changes are, first is the inability to store services because services cannot be stored. Next is need to be near to your customer. So it is very important that your service must be near to your customer. And the degree of demand volatility. So there is a changes or rapid unpredictably changes in the demand of your service. Now let's have the service capacity planning. So we have to consider the following in creating a service capacity planning. First is time. So since what I have mentioned to you a while ago, so services cannot be stored for a later consumption. Capacity must be available to provide the service when it is needed. And location. You have to be near to your customer for convenience. Capacity and location are closely tied. They go hand in hand. Service goods must be at the customer demand point and capacity must be located near the customer. And volatility of demand, much greater than in manufacturing. Volume and timing of demand, time required of service individuals to customers. So service might be different from the product capacity planning. Timing and sizes of changes, which talks about frequency and capacity additions. So capacity expansion, factors to consider in expanding your product or service. First is the volume and certainty of anticipated demand. Strategic objective for growth, cost of expansion and its operation, incremental or one-step expansion, and the frequency or of capacity and additions. So optimal operating level. So we have two. First is the economies of scale. So economies of scale, if the output rate is less than the optimal level, it increases the output rate. That results in decreasing average unit of cost. Why? Because fixed costs are spread over the larger number of units. Construction costs increase at a decreasing rate as facility size increases. And processing costs decrease due to the standardization. Now, let's move to these economies of scale. So, if the output rate is more than the optimal level, increasing the output rate results in increasing average unit cost. Why? The reason is distribution cost increase due to traffic congestion. There's also shipping from a centralized facility rather than multiple smaller facility. There's also complexity increases cost and an issue on inflexibility. And last, the issue on bureaucracy. So upon facing different problems in the company, so we have what we call the experience curve, wherein it emphasizes that price per unit is decreasing because as plant produce more products, they gain experience in the best production method and reduce their cost per unit. So bumababa ang cost per unit based on their experience. They put some adjustment, they create innovations, and do some changes depending on the situation or the problem that they are encountering. So from this situation, we can say that from this, experience is the best teacher. So the company may use innovation or may create another strategy in order to come up with the best solution in the problem that they are facing or having in the company. And external sources of capacity. So we may also experience different problems in the company, one of which is a bottleneck operation. So it is an operation in a sequence of operation whose capacity is lower than of the other operation. So there are bottlenecks within the operation in the company. So constraint management. So constraint is something that limits the performance of the process or system in achieving goal. So what are the categories of constraint in the management? First is the market, the resources, the material, financial, acknowledge or competency, and the policies. So resolving constraint issues may identify the most pressing constraint, identify the problem, the constraint, change the operation to achieve maximal benefit given the constraint. Make sure other portions of the process are supportive of the constraint. Explore and evaluate ways to overcome the constraint. Or you may repeat the process until the constraint levels are at acceptable levels. So strategies for matching capacity to demand. Demand management strategies may use to offset capacity limitation and that are intended to achieve a closer match between supply and demand. So it also pertains to its pricing, promotion, back orders, offering complementary products by having discount, by other tactics to shift demand from peak period into slow period. So the purpose of marketing may be applied in this demand management strategy. So a company or organization may also apply the capacity management strategy. So they may adjust equipment and processes, which might include purchasing additional machinery or selling or leasing out existing equipment. They also make staffing change in staff. They may decrease the number of employees. Third one is they may improve methods of increased throughput. They may also redesign the product to facilitate more throughput or for faster processing. Okay, things that can be done to enhance capacity management. First one, design flexibility into system. Second, take stage of life cycle into account. Take a big picture approach to capacity changes. Prepare to deal with capacity chunks. Attempt to smooth out capacity requirements. Identify the optimal operating level. And choose a strategy if expansion is involved. Though capacity flexibility. So capacity flexibility can be flexible plants, flexible processes, and then there might be flexible, or there must be a flexible workers. Now, assumption of cost volume analysis. So one product is involved. Everything produced can be sold. Variable cost per unit is the same regardless of volume. And fixed costs do not change with volume. Revenue per unit is the same regardless of volume. And revenue per unit exceeds variable cost per unit. So under the financial analysis, we have to consider the cash flow, or our basis is our cash flow, wherein we have to identify the difference between cash received from cash sales and other sources, and cash outflow for labor, material, and overhead and taxes. So from the cash flow, it is the expenses which is directly involved in the operation of the business. The present value, the sum in current value of all the future cash flows of an investment proposed. And that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, so to give us additional discussions about capacity planning. Again, in capacity planning, it based on the timeline, is classified into three main categories. So either long range, medium range, or a short range. So when we say long-term capacity, the long-range capacity of an organization is dependent on various other capacities like design capacity, production, sustainable capacity, and effective capacity. Design capacity is the maximum output possible as indicated by equipment manufacturer under ideal working conditions. Production capacity is the maximum output possible from equipment under normal working condition or day. On the other hand, no, sustainable capacity is the maximum production level achievable in realistic work conditions and considering normal machine breakdown, maintenance, and others. And the effective capacity is the optimum production level under predefined job and work schedules, normal machine breakdown, maintenance, and others. Medium term capacity, the strategic capacity planning undertaken by organizations for 2 to 3 years of a time frame is referred to as a medium-term capacity planning. For a short-term capacity, the strategic planning undertaken by organization for a daily, weekly, or quarterly time frame is referred to as a short-term capacity planning. The goal of a capacity planning, of course, is the ultimate goal of the capacity planning is to meet the current and future level of the requirement as a minimal waste age. No? The three types of course, as I mentioned, of course, factors affecting capacity planning, forecasting versus capacity planning, of course, and forecasting versus, ayun, as I mentioned, no? Capacity planning. Now, the ultimate goal, as I mentioned, is the factors affecting capacity planning. Because effective capacity planning is dependent upon factors like production facility, layout, design, and location, product line or matrix, or production technology, human capital, job design, and compensation. For the operational structure, that is scheduling and quality assurance. And for external structure, that is policy and safety regulations. Now, if we are asking about the comparison of forecasting versus capacity planning, there would be a scenario where capacity planning done on a basis of forecasting may not exactly match. For example, 3 could be of course, for example, there could be a scenario where demand is more than production capacity. So in this situation, a company needs to fulfill its requirement by buying from outside. If demand is equal to production capacity, therefore company is in a position to use its production capacity to the fullest. But if the demand is less than the production capacity, company can choose to reduce the production or share its output with other manufacturers. Okay, so that's it for the capacity planning.